Hey boys and girls, I have a new chapter book that I want to read with you guys. It's called School Days According to Humphrey. It's about a class pet, a hamster class pet, kind of like Toasty here, who's trying to run away. In this classroom, there's Humphrey and a frog named Og. I thought this would be fun to read. I have some other teacher friends who say that the Humphrey books are really good and really funny. So, School Days According to Humphrey, and this book is written by Betty Birney. So, chapter 1 is called The Worst First Day Begins. It was a quiet morning in room 26. So quiet that all I could hear was the scratching of my pencil as I wrote in my little notebook. I'm writing a poem at the end of summer, Og. I squeaked to my neighbor, the classroom frog. I'm Humphrey, the classroom hamster. I'll read you what I have so far. Summer, oh summer, I hate to say goodbye. Summer, oh summer, must you end, and why? Og splashed gently in his tank as I continued. I love summer days at Camp Happy Hollow, and now that they're over, I stopped because there was nothing more to read. Boing, Og twanged. Green frogs like him don't say ribbit. They make a sound like a broken guitar string. Boing, boing. I haven't finished it yet, Og, I explained. I have to find a word that rhymes with hollow. Wallow or swallow. I stared down at the page again. I loved summer days at Camp Happy Hollow, and now that they're over, I can hardly swallow. Og dived down deeply in his tank, splashing noisily. I don't think much of the line either, I replied. I'll try again. Just then, our teacher, Mrs. Brisbane, came bustling into the room carrying a stack of papers. As usual, I quickly hid my notebook behind the mirror in my cage. As much as I love humans, some things are better kept private. After all my years of teaching, I should have known by now that on the first day of school, the line for the copy machine would be out the door, Miss Brisbane said. She stacked the papers on her desk, stared up at the chalkboard and the bulletin boards, which were bare except for a list of rules in Miss Brisbane's neat handwriting. I'd copied those rules in my notebook while Miss Brisbane was down at the office. I intended to memorize them as soon as possible. Miss Brisbane glanced up at the clock. School starts soon, she said, turning towards the table by the window where Og and I spend most of our time, in case you two are interested. I am, I said, and I meant it. Even though I was sorry that summer was ending, I was glad to be back in good old room 26 again. After the last camp session was over, my friend, Miss Mack, brought me back to the house where Mrs. Brisbane and her husband, Bert, live. Og and I spend a few weeks with them. I loved to go to the Brisbane's house, but it was so quiet there. I was looking forward to seeing my classmates again. Some of them had been at camp, like AJ, Garth, Miranda, and Sae. But I hadn't seen some of the other ones for an unsqueakably long time. The door swung open, and in walked the most important person at Longfellow School, Principal Morales. Mrs. Brisbane is in charge of the whole class of students, but Mr. Morales is in charge of the whole school. As usual, he was wearing an interesting tie. This one had little books in different colors. Morning, Sue, he said to Miss Brisbane. Ready to go? As ready as I'll ever be, she said. He walked over to our table by the window. Guys, I hope you're all set to go back to work. Yes, 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 I answered, wishing that he could hear more than just the usual squeak, squeak, squeak humans hear. Boing, agreed Og. Good, the principal said, glancing up at the clock. I'd better be outside to meet the buses. Have a great one, Sue. You too, Mrs. Brisbane said. She hurried back to her desk and studied a piece of paper, then began muttering strange words like Phoebe, Harry, Kelsey. Goodness, were we going to be learning new languages this year? Thomas, Rosie, Paul. Did she say Paul? I knew that word. It was the name of a boy who had come into the class last year for math. I was about to point this out to Og when the bell rang as loud as ever. No matter how long I'm a student in room 26, I will never get used to that noisy bell. Mrs. Brisbane opened the classroom door, and soon students started to come in. I realized right away that something was wrong, terribly wrong. Miss Brisbane smiled as the students entered. "Take a seat," she said, "any seat." I climbed up high in my cage so I could get a better look. "Who are these kids, Og?" I asked my neighbor. "I've never seen them before." "Boing," he answered, splashing noisily. More unfamiliar students came in the room. One of them was a girl who whizzed by in her wheelchair. Another was a boy who was really tall. He was as tall as our teacher, maybe taller. "Just take a seat, children." How could Miss Brisbane be so cheery, knowing these students did not belong in room 26? As the classroom hamster, I felt I had to squeak up. "You're in the wrong room," I squeaked. "This is not your room. Go back." "Welcome," Miss Brisbane told the students. "Take a seat." "Wrong room," I scrambled to the tippy top of my cage. "This is room 26. Unfortunately, my voice is small and squeaky, and I guess nobody heard me, because the students went ahead and sat down. Miss Brisbane kept on smiling, and nobody budged. Oh, how I wished I had a loud voice like my friend. Lower your voice, AJ. When the bell rang, my heart sank. Mrs. Brisbane is a great, great, great teacher, and pretty smart for a human. So why didn't she notice that her class was full of the wrong students? Og, what should we do? I asked my froggy friend. This time he didn't answer. I guess he was as confused as I. Hey, Humphrey, it's me. Hi, a familiar voice shouted. Slow Down Simon raced up to my cage. He was the younger brother of Stop Giggling Gale, who did belong in room 26, but she was nowhere in sight. Now I'll get to take you home some weekend, Simon announced. Go back to your own room, or you'll be late, I warned him. Mrs. Brisbane told him to take a seat. Simon twirled around and rushed away, bumping into a girl with a bright red hair, whose chair was sticking out in the aisle. You should be more careful, Kelsey, he said. You ran into me. The girl rubbed her arm. She probably got a big bruise. Ouch. What's happening just doesn't make sense, I told Og. I don't think I was making a lot of sense either. It was as if the world had just been turned all upside down, and Og and I were the only ones who noticed. Hi, Humphrey, a soft voice said. I looked up, and there was Paul Fletcher, whom I thought of as Small Paul. He was the boy who came in for math class every day last year because he was unsqueakably good with numbers. Paul was smart. I knew he'd understand. Why are these students in the wrong room? I asked him. He pushed up his glasses, which had slid down from his nose. This year I get to take you home, he said. I can't wait. What was he talking about? Only students in room 26 got to take me home for the weekend. Settle down, class, Miss Brisbane said. Please take your seats. Class? What was she talking about? This wasn't my class. Where was AJ and Garth, Heidi and Mandy? Where were Gail and her giggles? Where were Richie, Art, Tabitha, and Seth? Where were Kirk and his jokes? And where in the world was the almost perfect golden Miranda? Mrs. Brisbane, I squeaked, in case you haven't noticed, this isn't our class. Miss Brisbane was too busy counting the students to hear me. We're short one student, she said, but while we're waiting, let me welcome you all to room 26. Crushed, I scrambled back to the floor of my cage and scurried into my sleeping hut, where I could be alone to think. I remembered that poem I had written about summer, and now I had a new idea for a new verse. Summer, oh summer, with days long and lazy, now that you're over, things are going crazy. Humphrey's rule of school. Before you take your seat in a classroom, it's always a good idea to make sure you're in the right room. This is important. That's the end of chapter 1.